What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Country Central podcast. We're hanging out with Dan Smyers of Dan and Shay fame. And the first thing I really wanted to get into, I think, obviously y'all had hits before, like Speechless and Tequila, but I really think that self titled album was kind of like the turning point a little bit, becoming a crossover act and those types of things. And that's also like kind of where the term boyfriend country came from. I think at the time in like 2018, it was used as a bit of a pejorative, but I don't know about you, but I really don't see it that way. I mean, I think y'all were kind of like trendsetters in a way as far as like where country radio was happening, what was happening there. So I was curious to kind of get your take on that and like how the sound kind of evolved in that way.
Man, I won't ramble too much, but Shay and I, we met. No one put us together. It wasn't a setup kind of thing. We were both two clowns chasing the dream. We moved to Nashville because we love country music and we wanted to write country music. And we moved here. I remember I found a house on Craigslist with my buddy Andy, who's actually Andy Albert is his name. He's a hit songwriter. Got a bunch of number ones now, and he's just one of the most brilliant minds in this town. But we moved here. We were doing a band like an alt rock kind of thing, and we moved here, and it wasn't really working out. We were just getting our feet wet. We were meeting as many people as possible, playing open mic nights, doing the thing, and I'd been at it for a long time. I'd done this my whole life. I'd toured in cars and vans, and sat on drum kits, whatever, to get to the next city, that kind of thing. And you're living off of Taco Bell or whatever, Wendy's, like a dollar menu, just to get to the next city. And I just been at it for a long time, man. And there came a point where doing the artist thing, like, it became, I don't know, it became really tough for me. It was like, I need to figure out a way, because I was so stubborn about doing this on my own. I moved to Nashville. No one helped me. Nobody gave me money. I didn't take any money from my parents, and I was very, very dead set on that. And I was like, I got to figure out how to do this. And the artist thing it just wasn't working, right? We had met with a bunch of record labels, taken meetings, done the thing, and it wasn't happening. And it ended up being for the best for both Andy and I. But at the time, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to be a songwriter. That's why I moved to Nashville, kind of in the first place, because Music Row is where the songs are written, and I'm just going to be a songwriter and a producer. And the producing thing sort of fell into my lap by accident, just out of necessity, because we didn't have any money. So it was like I was sitting here on this. I did get a new laptop finally, but I was rolling on the same laptop for like 10 years, which just is unheard of in technology world. But Shay and I just met randomly, like, and that's how it happens, right? Like, I had given up on doing the artist thing. I was just going to be a writer, producer, and this kid comes over my house one night. We had like a house party, and I don't know, y'all. Probably I can go into more on this story if it's of any interest to you guys, but we had a tent in our living room because we couldn't afford heat or AC. So we went to the Music City Thrift on Nolensville Road, spent $6, and we got a bunch of sheets, right? And we tented out this living room, and it's like we just huddled around. Andy had a space heater that he brought from home, and it was in the middle. I mean, it was definitely a fire hazard, unfortunately, but we'd kick it in there, man, and write songs, until the sun came up. And this kid comes over one night with a mutual friend, and I'd never heard of him, and I know he had been doing his thing for a while. And as I later found out, like, this was not the case, but it was the quietest, most shy guy in the world. He's sitting there. We're all like passing the guitar around, like singing songs out of tune and doing our thing. And it's like 2 a.m. and this kid sitting here in a flannel shirt goes, "Hey man, my name's Shay. I'm from Arkansas. Can I sing something? I write songs too." This guy starts singing, and we're all just like, "Oh my!" We were floored, man. We had no idea like what was going on. I took out my phone and I voice memoed him. This was December 7th, 2012, and I did a voice memo, and I titled it "Best Singer in the World." And I mean, we had all been drinking. We had a keg of PBR that somebody left like 3 weeks prior. It was like growing mold on the top, but it's free. So that was chilling in the backyard, and this guy sang, and I was blown away. And that was just like, that was a pivotal moment in my life. And we wrote the next day, and I don't think we went to sleep that night. We were all chilling, and that's what we did. We drink until 4 or 5 a.m. and we'd be hanging out because we had nothing else to do. We didn't have jobs or whatever. And we hit up our buddy Jesse, who's Jesse Frazier, hit songwriter, has like a big number one with Cole Swindell and a million other number ones with everybody else in town. Good friend, insanely talented guy, and he's been a champion of us since day one. We hit him up. We had nowhere to write, and other than the tent, but there were people sleeping in the tent. So we were like, we got to get out. We got to go write something. So he was at this publishing company called Major Bob at the time. We hit him up, and he's like, "Yeah, dude, I got an open room." And we go in there, just Shay and I still have these handwritten lyrics written out somewhere. Sorry, this is all coming back to me, and I'm rambling. Y'all could cut me off or edit this down later, but I
No, you're
That was
handwritten
good.
these
beautiful.
lyrics out that eventually ended up, we were kayaking down the Harpeth River. We tipped the kayak, and the lyrics went into the river, so they're all waterlogged, which I guess makes them like a little more special. You can still
The
kind of read
water
the lyrics of
stain
this
gives it a
song.
quality, right?
Exactly, dude. It's like, yeah, it's a whole thing. And we wrote 2 songs that day, and we weren't even planning on being a duo. I'd kind of given up on the artist thing, and I was like, I'm just going to be a songwriter producer guy. And we had obviously grew up listening to country music and country radio, and we were like, man, we got to get some, like, we should write some songs for Keith Urban or Rascal Flatts or Chesney McGraw. And we wrote this song, and Jesse was like, I bet you guys $5. And we're like, dude, I can't bet $5. Like, I don't have $5. He's like, I'll give you guys $5. He's like, I bet this song will get put on hold for Rascal Flatts tonight by dinner time. And sure enough, he sent the song to Allison Jones, a good friend of ours at Big Machine, and it got put on hold for Rascal Flatts. The song never got cut or came out. You know how that goes. It's one of those games. But it was just like, that was a bit of hope in a kind of a dark period in my life where I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna have to move back to my hometown, if I have to give up or whatever, go back to school. And Shay and I just nonstop, we were just writing and writing and writing, and all those songs, those early, unfiltered, just songs that we were writing, became our first album. We didn't know what we were doing. We were kind of writing for other people, kind of just writing, having fun, drinking beers, and hanging out, and like taking any meeting we could get. I mean, I remember we were meeting with every publishing company, every label in Nashville, just to get the free lunch. I mean, we would take home. We were living on, one of the labels like brought us PF Chang's and like had this whole spread, and like we ate our meal, we sang a few songs. And I remember they come in like the 10 to go things. I took all of them home, and we just like lived off that for 3 weeks. I mean, it was, I could tell those stories for days, man. But Shay and I just, we just were writing with nobody telling us what to do, nobody getting in the way. And fortunately for us, that's kind of been the trajectory of our career. That's kind of how we've done it the whole way. We it fell into our laps. We met each other. It was a fate thing, I think. I mean, we realized after that there were so many crazy overlapping similarities. Like, he had lived, I grew up outside of Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania, and he had lived, he had gone, his sister was, I think, working at a church up there, and he was living less than a mile from where I grew up. I mean, of all the places in the world, like those kind of things, we knew all the same spots in the mall, and the whole deal. And that was just crazy thing that was like, this is like too good to be true, right? And that first album, the Where It All Began album, 19 You and Me, those songs just kind of happened by accident. We were just writing songs, and I listen back now and I'm like, man, this was like, we didn't know what we were doing. I actually pulled up some of those sessions the other day, and I was listening back, and I think I was like feeling down on myself, like, just trying to, I was like, man, have I gotten better over the years, or have I gotten worse? And I was like, man, I was listening back to some of those original tracks. I was like, oh, I wish I could go back and re-record some of that stuff, but it's maybe we will someday. But I think the magic of it, that we were just 2 kids with a guitar that barely worked, it barely stayed in tune, and we made this album. And I think there was something special that like resonated with the fans there. And as we grew, and we got a record deal, and the record label, we thought, sorry, I'm rambling, guys, I apologize, but this is
You're
all like,
good. This is
this
this
is
is
all
this is
No,
amazing,
this is
man.
nostalgic stuff for me, man. And I get goosebumps even thinking about it, because it changed my life. And yeah, it's surreal. It really is. I get choked up kind of talking about it, but
No, I mean, I
because
remember.
it was tough, man.
Yeah, I
It
mean,
was like
19
it
You and
was.
Me, Dan. I mean, that's like a core memory, I'd say, for me. I remember being in California in 2014 and just like playing that album, and like you said, like it had a quality about it. Just like you said, it was, to your point, was unfiltered, but there was, at the time, I'd say, in the industry, and Jack, you can like back me up, it just was a time where people were wanting something like melodic, something where people, the harmonies were tight and really well written, and it reminded them of something, maybe a Kenny Chesney's Equality song or Rascal Flats. And I know that's what really got me into country as a kid, like those like really tight knit like harmonies and well written stuff, and just I love the production on it. Like that's really what I loved growing up as a kid, and it wasn't a surprise for me that like you all kind of got your big start from that album, and it went on from there. But I mean, it just, 19 You and Me sounds like, I mean, stop. I mean, What You Do to Me, like there's a reason that you guys were big, because I think at the time in country people were wanting that, and Jack and I joke, coming off of quote unquote the bro country era, people were welcoming that, so it was something that came to the right place, right time, and obviously, I mean, people maybe not known like how talented you were as writers, but that's why the success has continued. So it is really cool to hear the backstory behind it all, because those are songs that, I mean, I don't care what anybody says. I mean, I've been a fan, and I think just knowing the craft behind it is impressive, and it is cool to see now how big y'all have gotten. Because and I won't ramble too much here, but I know just where Andy started. I remember one of his old bands I was a huge fan of, and same with you. And it just kind of wild to see like, hey, like these are the people now kind of running things in the industry, if you will, and it's just mind blowing. You know what I mean? So it's really cool to hear the backstory behind it, understand the craft that goes into it, because it's no joke. It's a ton of hard work, and I'm sure maybe a tiny bit of luck, but there's so much work that you put in. So it's really cool to understand that.
Yeah, man, it's wild to think back on it, and I guess we've all kind of persevered. We stuck around long enough, and that's kind of that punk rock scene, and we can talk about that in a little bit. But the back to the question, I kind of forgot what you even asked. I got carried away talking about it, but the Where It All Began album was just like kind of happened by accident, right? We were just two guys who were just having a blast. Like we found our musical soulmates with each other, and we were just writing songs, just not overthinking anything. And we got signed to Warner Music Nashville, and I remember we went in that day, and I'm looking around, and there's all these like plaques on the wall, and there it was crazy. John Esposito, who was the president of the label, he's actually a Steelers fan, a diehard Steelers fan like me. And I walk in, and he has a whole shrine of Steelers stuff on his wall. This is like where people tune out on the podcast who hate the Steelers. I apologize, but it's in my blood. And he, is a diehard Steelers fan, and I was like staring at it, and he was like, later tells the story. I thought he was a Cleveland Browns fan. I thought we were going to lose the deal, but sure enough, it wasn't the case. And we're in there. It's like 10 or 11 a.m. and we sing a couple songs, maybe 19 You and Me, one other one. And, we didn't know what we were doing. We were in the president of the Warner Music Nashville's office. Like, this is surreal. We didn't know enough to be nervous or scared. So we're singing, and they're like, you guys want to crack a cold beer? We're like, hell yeah, we do. So we crack cold beers like 10 or 11 a.m. and we're in there drinking. And he looks at us and he says, you guys, he's like, somebody go close that door. Y'all aren't leaving this room until you sign with Warner Music Nashville. And we were just like, done. Where do we sign? Like we're in, and it was that quick, and it was love at first sight with them. And they let us do our thing. And I was like, cool. So like, here's our demos. There's like 70 demos. Who do you think should produce our record? Like, when should we start writing for our record? And they're like, no, we want to release these demos like as your first album. Like, you guys are done. Like, sure, we can go mix it. And we went and mixed those songs with Justin Niebank and added a couple things here and there. I was like, I bought this mandolin and banjo from Guitar Center for like, $75 off the refurbished aisle or whatever. And it sounded awful, but we ended up like replacing that stuff and doing the thing for real. But and that first album was just two guys just meeting for the first time, writing songs, and nobody telling us how they should sound or what we should be talking about. And I think people really resonated with that. And then, on to the second album, it was like, cool, we kind of know sort of, we're a band now. We have a band name. It's not the most creative name. It's Dan and Shay, because when we would walk into people's offices, they'd be like, oh, Dan and Shay are here again. All right, we got to restock the fridge, or we got to go buy them a meal, because they're always coming in trying to get that free meal. So the second album, the first song that we had written for that album was a song called From the Ground Up, which ended up changing our lives in a big way. And I still listen back to that song, and that's still such a special song to me, to my family. I had gone to Ohio to my grandfather's funeral, and I was just like super emotional and choked up, and I came back to Nashville, and Shay and I were getting together to record a demo vocal on another song that we had written a couple weeks prior at our buddy Chris DiStefano's place. And we sat there. He stepped out to take a phone call, and we were sitting there, and I had this idea for like a kind of a Christmas song sort of thing called From the Ground Up, and it was like about the snow, comparing a relationship or somebody's love to snow building from the ground up, and it was going to be this thing. And that's kind of why it's got that 6/8 waltz sort of feel. And eventually we just started like I kind of started talking about like memories of being back at my grandfather's funeral, and like, seeing the house that I grew up going to visit my grandparents at, and that kind of thing. And Shay and I were just like getting super emotional. And it was like, man, I don't think this is a Christmas song at all. Like, I think this is like a love song that It's inspired by our grandparents, who, crazy enough, were both married for over 65 years, which is, the first line of the song. And that song we wrote, it was just like a little scratch acoustic work tape thing that we ended up producing up with strings and doing the whole deal. And that was like our first real experience cutting a orchestra and cutting a real band in a studio. And at that time we knew we had a special song, but it was like, it's always a risk to lead off an album, and we're notorious for it. Lead off an album with a
Big
ballad
ballad.
like that. Yeah, exactly. It's always like, cool, great song, guys. Maybe song of the year kind of song, but do you have anything tempo? And it's like, well, shit, I thought you said this was a great song. But yeah, we did. We let it off with that, and everybody at the label and country radio was super excited, and that one went to #1 for us, and that kind of set the tone for that album. And that album, I listened back, and I don't think it's our best album, but there are some great songs on that album. I feel like half of it's really great, half of it is like exploratory, and we were kind of trying to figure out that sound. And I think that's the growth, that's the evolution of any artist. You're going to find that throughout the trajectory of their career and their musical releases. But there were some great songs on that album. Like there was a song called Lipstick that I thought was a really special song called Already Ready that I thought was really cool.
Obviously, How Not To was another
Yeah, How
number
Not
one,
To.
correct? And I think the cool thing
Yeah.
about that going #1 was, right? I mean, for people that don't know, Paul DiGiovanni, he was a part of that, correct?
Yeah, he was,
And
dude. And I got a long, funny story about that one too.
right.
But
So for people who don't know, I mean, he was the guitarist, or he's still the guitarist for Boys Like Girls, but he's also become like one of the biggest writers and producers in Nashville. And I just love seeing like when that went #1, it's like that helped his stock grow, and then now he's one of the biggest guys in town. And it's always cool to see that there's like that brotherhood and that community that people already know in Nashville. But I know like for you all, and we will get back into it with like the kind of pop rock, pop punk scene. I mean, a lot of this goes back to a community that now is in Nashville that's continuing to grow and almost, run the town in a sense. So it's really cool to see that that was a huge single for y'all, and it's been able to help so many other people along the way.
yeah, man, Paul's one of my best friends. He was in my wedding. I was in his wedding. Like, we're super close. I still got him in my phone as Paul BLG, because when I met him, he was in Boys Like Girls. He's that guy, and he's back in Boys Like Girls again, full circle. But he's just a great guy, and he's always been immensely talented. And he'll never tell you that. He's understated, he's quiet, he's humble, but he is so talented. And that song came across our inbox. It was funny because we're cutting a few songs, and we were working on that album with Scott Hendricks, who's one of my heroes, mentors, idols, best friends. Like, I got married at his house. Like, he's the guy. Right?
For people who don't know,
produced,
Dan, I mean, like Blake Shelton's producer.
yeah,
Hendricks,
and he
correct?
produced Alan Jackson,
That's
Brooks
not
and
as
Dunn,
well.
Legend.
Restless Heart. Everything. He has over 100 #1s, I think. Just he wrote the book, right? He's incredible. And we were traveling, doing some promo for something, and we were cutting at Ocean Way, I think the next morning or 2 days after, and we had a couple songs in the pile that we were going to cut. Already Ready was one of them. Lipstick was one of them. I think maybe we were cutting From the Ground Up as well. It's going to be a good session. And there was the fourth song we had. I didn't love it. It was like a little too pop leaning. It had some lyrics that were just like, I don't know. Like, and he was like, this is a hit. And I've told this story a million times in front of him. So I'm going to impersonate him. We're going to go there. But he's like, I swear this is a hit song. We have to record it. I was like, I don't know, Scott. Like, it's a little bit pop. Like, doesn't really feel like the rest of the songs we're recording. He's like, trust me. And he's like, I got a story for you. And he's like, it was back in whatever the 90s. And he's like, I found this song. It was like a pop R&B kind of thing. And I said, this is a country smash. And the artist I was recording it on, he was like, no, Scott, it's too pop. And he was like, you know what that song was called? I Swear, for John Michael Montgomery. And he drops that on me. I was like, oh man, like, you can't drop the I Swear card.
Respect your elders after you hear that line.
Yeah,
Right?
dude. So I went into it. I was like, we got to cut this song. And then the next morning, 7 a.m., I'm like driving this. I'm always like the first one at the studio, like loading up, routing the board, doing the thing. And I'm driving to the studio, and I text my friend Rohan, who's actually an A&R, another guy in my wedding, like best friend, and he's actually an A&R at Warner now, so another full circle bit. But he managed Boys Like Girls, and he managed Hey Monday, Cassidy Post Band. Like, he was the guy in that scene in New York City, and he was managing a bunch of songwriters at the time, and he was managing Paul. And I was like, yo, Ro, and I trust this guy's musical opinion, like songs, like, he's the guy. He's so good. And I texted him. I was like, hey, man, driving to the studio. We're cutting today. Got a couple songs. Not sure about the fourth one. You got anything great? and he sent me a song called Not To, which ended up becoming How Not To. And I didn't know who wrote it. I didn't know that Paul was on it. I didn't know anything. I just heard it, and I was like one chorus in, stopped it. I called him, and he's like, yeah, it's on hold for a couple artists. I'm like, no, I don't care if it's on hold. We're gonna record it, and then I'll call those artists. Like we were felt so strongly about that song, and we didn't write it. It was the first outside song we'd ever recorded. But we always say that our fans and everybody in the industry deserves the best song. The best song should always win, whether we write it or not. And I think that's what makes this business go around. And that thing's kind of coming back a little bit. You see guys like Cody Johnson who are cutting. He's an amazing songwriter in his own right, but he's cutting primarily outside songs because we get so busy out on the road. We're touring, we're doing the thing, and there's professional songwriters writing sometimes 2-3 songs a day, 7 days a week. So their odds are going to be higher to write a great song. So I feel like that's just one thing we've never been super precious about. If the great outside song comes in, the fans aren't, obviously there's the authenticity factor of it, but it's like the fans aren't going to question if we can write songs or not. They're just going to go, I love that Dan and Shay song. And we took it and made it our own in the studio. And, we're proud to take that song to #1. It was their first #1. It was Adam Hambrick was on that song, who's a talented artist,
very talented,
on his own. Kevin Bard, who was in also a punk rock band called Stereo Skyline, who was on Warped Tour and did the whole thing. And Paul. And like, man, that, these little moments, they change all of our lives in more ways than we even know. Paul was going to find a way, he was going to make it, and he was going to produce big hit records no matter what. But that was just like one of the things that tipped the domino for him. And for us, that was just another big song. We strung together a few #1s in a row, and that gave us momentum and, allowed us to keep doing what we were doing and building our fan base. But then on to the third album, it was like, I always say
Rocket Ship album.
Yeah, dude, that was the one that like really, really changed everything. We had been building it and doing things our own way. I always tell new artists this because I'm just like such a psycho. I'm always listening to new music, and I'll DM an artist and be like, I love what you're doing. Like, keep doing what you're doing because it's working, and don't let anyone else get in the way because what you have is really, really special. And I'm so fortunate that we had a label, we had a team that didn't get in our way. They, for better or for worse, let us do what we wanted to do. And that's kind of my advice to new artists, because not everybody has that same luxury of being with Warner Music Nashville where we could carve our own path. And we were kind of figuring it out on that second album. As I said, like there were some songs that weren't so great. There were some great songs. We figured out what worked, what our fans liked, and we were out while this was all happening, building a hard ticket. And that's another bit of advice is like, man, go out there. It's cool to do the support tours. We were so fortunate to get, Blake Shelton took us out, Hunter Hayes, Darius. We've been out, with everybody, but we were always in between those weekend dates, the Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We were going like Monday through Wednesday playing clubs. We were playing on Joe's on Weed Street, Kane's Ballroom, those kind of clubs, Honky Tonks, Cotton Eye Joe, wherever it may be. We were going out there and trying to win fans over, just standing outside the bus and meeting everybody who wanted to stick around. And I feel like we built lifelong fans because of that. So everything was kind of bubbling up to that third album. We knew we needed to deliver. We had the attention of kind of the industry. Everyone, in Nashville knew our name. People were aware of us. We had met everyone in country radio. There's more reporting stations now, but at the time, I think there was like 135 reporting stations. I think we're close to 160 now. But we had met everybody, and it was like, this is an opportunity where we really need to step up our game. So we just we buckled down. We wrote. And when it came time to pick the first single, again, we're just always the idiots who go with the ballad as the first single, but I've got a couple reasonings for that. I mean, if you're gonna get like any kind of gimme points or a world premiere or those kind of things, it's probably gonna happen on the first single, and you need all the jet fuel you can get to get a ballad going. But when a ballad connects, I think those are some of the biggest country songs of all time. I think those songs really resonate in people's hearts, and Tequila was one that was kind of a sound like that piano driven 4-1-5-6, like that kind of brooding, heartfelt, longing, nostalgic lyric was sort of something that was reacting with our fans. From the first album, we had a song called I Heard Goodbye that I thought was a really good one. And I mentioned Lipstick earlier. Those were kind of in that vein. And we were like, you know what? If this is what our fans are digging, we got to lead with something that's like that. But I feel like Tequila was that, on, on 10. It was like those things, what those things, why the fans like those songs. It was Tequila was like all those things combined, put in one. And we decided to go with that as a single. And there were some people who were saying like, yeah, it's never going to work. It's like, it's a ballad. Because we had another song on that record called Alone Together, which I thought would have been a hit country
Dude,
song. Like,
Dan,
yeah,
I just have to interject. I mean, that's my favorite song. I mean, that's the one for me. So it's kind of funny that that was possibly a single choice. Doesn't surprise me, but like obviously Tequila. I mean, I would love to hear how that came together. Obviously, like, with Nicole being a part of it, there's a reason why
yeah,
it was such
dude.
a special song.
Yeah, Alone Together was I still think it was a hit for us. Like, yeah, it didn't like go to radio or do its thing, but we still play it in our live show. It's in the first couple songs in the set, no matter what. It set the tone for the album, and we wrote that with Jesse Frazier and Hillary Lindsey, two of our favorite people in the world, and that was just, there were a lot of people saying like this is the first single, and I wish we would have gotten to more singles on the album, but you know how it goes. It
Yep.
takes a while, and then by the time, we got to keep super serving our fans. By the time you come around to the third single, it's like we've got like two more albums worth of material written, and then you throw in a pandemic, and it's like, oh man. But yeah, that was a special song, and we just felt, I don't know what it was about Tequila. Like we wrote it, I wrote that with Jordan Reynolds and Nicole Gallion, two of the best writers in Nashville who are just on fire right now. And we wrote that, and it was just a piano and a vocal, and people loved the song, but it was like Shay and I just felt differently about it. We were like, this is the one. This is going to be the thing that changes our lives, And we were showing it to everybody, and they're like, this is a great song, like, but should we come with an up tempo first? Like, should we do that? And I was like, I don't know. And we didn't even have Tequila mixed. We had Tequila, a song called Island Time, and Alone Together. And they were all kind of like 70% done. Tequila was just in my Pro Tools session in rough form. And we just knew, man. We knew. We were in London, actually. We were playing a show, and we had to make that call. We pulled our previous single off the last album because we were just like, this one's not working. We have this song that we believe in called When I Taste Tequila at the time. And I had this weird idea to just call it Tequila, and a whole marketing thing behind that. But we decided to go with it as the single, and we finished it. And we knew it was a special record, but we had some proving to do. We had to prove that to the people. And when we put the song out, it didn't even get on New Music Friday. It wasn't number one most added. It wasn't any of those things. But we were just like, we believe in this song so wholeheartedly, and we're just going to fight to the death for this song. And we did, and our fans believed in it. And it was a slow build. It was a slow climb. And that's another bit of encouragement to any other artist out there, man. I'm seeing a lot of these songs, like Hailey Whitters is one of my favorite artists in the world, and like her song is popping off right now. But it took a minute, right? And it's just like a great song or great art will always find a way. And I know her thing happened on TikTok, and it was like these funny videos were happening, but that was a great song. Yeah, exactly. And that was a great song it was gonna find its way eventually. And we just stayed with it on Tequila, man. And we had great supporters who kept the song on playlists, and our fans were just like calling stations and requesting it. That was like back in the day when you could call a station and request it, and it was a slow build. But man, that song, the life cycle of that song was like 2.5 years. It went number one at country. It was a 1 week number one at country. We look back, and I think it's about 8 times platinum now. It was a big song, and it was only 1 week at country. It went up, went down, and then we came a Speechless after, which was like a big 1-2 punch for us.
Mm-hmm.
But then it crossed over to Hot AC, and it crossed over to top 40, and I think it went top 10 at both of those, which like that wasn't what we were aiming for when we wrote the song. But like we always say, the crossover stuff has been amazing for us, man. We feel it's been great introducing new people to our music. But I think there were a lot of crossover things happening at the time, like Body Like a Back Road happened for Sam, and historically there's been crossover stuff like Amazed by Lone Star. I feel like was a
First country
multi-format.
song I heard
Yeah,
as a
dude,
kid, man. That was my favorite
it's still
country
like
song.
if that song came out today, it's like that's a copyright, man. It's a gold record. It's so good. And Tequila like did its thing. We weren't planning on it cross. It's a country lyric, man. It's like a story. Those songs now there's a lot more story and a lot more lyric, and I think Nashville has influenced that. There's a lot more of that on top 40 now. But at the time, it was like it's kind of novelty, for those formats, and we were grateful that it did, because we would have so many people. I kid you not, because there was pushback, from country radio. A lot of country radio guys said, "Are you guys abandoning country? Are you abandoning the format?" That's why we moved to Nashville, man. We love country music. We listen to country. We grew up listening to country music. We love writing it. That's what we do. We aren't compromising our sound. we obviously pull influences from everywhere, like we all do. We grew up in a generation where you could have a playlist or a mixtape or a burnt CD of music from all different genres, and I think that's a beautiful thing to take influence from everywhere. But we were writing country songs, and Tequila was a country song, and the fact that it crossed over like that, we had so many people coming up. This is kind of what I would tell programmers who would say, like, we're worried that you guys are leaving the format, you're not loyal. And it was like, man, we have so many people that come up to us and say, hey, I never listened to country music before, but I heard Tequila on my top 40 station, B94 or Kiss FM or Z100, whatever it is. And I turned my dial to the country station, and now I love country music. And I'm falling in love with all these artists that I've never heard of before. And I think that's a great thing, man. I think that kind of thing grows the format. And I feel like it worked in a sustainable way for us because, like I said, we weren't overtly trying to cross over. We didn't make a crazy dance record, with the hopes that that would happen. And there are artists who can pull that off. That's kind of never really been us, like where you have this career and this career and they're happening simultaneously. Like, more power to anybody who can do that. I think our thing has always just been like, write what we write, write what we know. And we sit down and we write songs like Tequila or Speechless. We're back to the boyfriend country thing. It's like, man, we were both in love with our wives and we had just gotten married, and the album was done. The self-titled album was done on that one. And
why was it self-titled, if you don't mind me asking? Because I mean, to me personally, Dan, like when I heard that, I mean, yes, and you've had good things since then, but like that album, man, like I think for any fan, like no one had really complaints with it being the way it was. Like I think it was just a quintessential like moment for you all, and like I think it was just the perfect like blend of pop at that time in country. So I was curious, why did you title it, or why was it self-titled?
Yeah, man, this comes back to like kind of how I've been evolving this growth of Dan and Shay. Like the first album, we had no clue what we were doing, and it worked out for us, man. I feel like when you listen to that album, it feels like that. It's like unbridled, wide-eyed energy, right? And the second album was an exploratory phase for us. Like we had some stuff where, okay, maybe not that. This is great. Let's figure it out. And I think the third album, we made it a self-titled album because I feel like that's when we really found ourselves. We found out who Dan and Shay is, who Dan and Shay wants to be, and where we see ourselves going. And it's hard to look back and pinpoint or to try to create that album again. There was a lot of magic, and like to have that 1-2 punch of Tequila and Speechless is like, man, we won Grammys for both of those songs consecutive years. Like that's crazy, it's surreal. Never in my wildest dreams did we even imagine getting nominated for a Grammy, but we freaking won. Well, we ended up winning a third one in a row, which was crazy too. But like on that one album, it's tough to, the album comes out, and for the life cycle to be that long, with those songs crossing over, I do think it extended the life cycle of the album too, because people were hearing Tequila on the radio for almost 2.5 years. And Speechless was kind of the same thing. Speechless did its thing. It went up the chart. That was we lucked out. We hit what's called the freeze on country radio, where the charts closed for a couple weeks
for holiday season.
Yep. Dude, everybody's gunning for that spot. Everybody's trying to land that number one, because you'll sit there for
multi-weeks,
4, 5, 6. I mean, Dustin Lynch nailed it. Andy Albert's song "Thinking About You" with Dustin Lynch. He
6 weeks,
like
right?
6 or 7 weeks. Yeah, dude, like perfect. It's great for songwriters, great for an artist to keep a song up there, and then you start with something fresh at the top of the year. We hit the freeze on Speechless, and we got a 4-week number one, which was amazing for us. And then that song crossed over, and I went even higher on top 40. And it was like, again, we were being asked, like, would you guys consider doing a remix or doing a feature? And we did a cool acoustic little version with Tori Kelly, who's one of my favorite singers of all time, but that wasn't the intention of crossing that over. It was just like, she sang the song with us at a party one time, and then we ended up singing it on TV together. And then it was like, we should record an acoustic version together. But we ended up just not doing any kind of remix on it. Same with Tequila. It was like, people were saying, should we make it faster? Should we put drums in the intro? Should we change the drum sound? And it was like, I mean, we're probably not going to. We're going to just let it be what it is. And if it works, great. If not, like, it was icing on the cake anyways. And it ended up working, man. And it was really cool to hear those songs like on top 40 radio in the midst of like records that didn't sound anything like them. And I think that's what made those songs cut through and stand out and stand the test of time, because they were unique and they had their own lane. And man, that like sequence was just life-changing for us. That kind of got us from theaters or clubs to the level where we could put on an arena tour on sale. And it was, man, surreal. This is all like, man, I feel like this stuff as I recount this, I don't get to do this very often, so thank you guys for letting me
Oh, it's a
ramble.
blast, man.
Course, dude.
It's like a dream come true. Really is, man. I never in my wildest dreams expected to do any of this. Like I wanted to, but it's so rare. Like that I would meet the best singer in the world and get to go on this crazy journey and talk to you guys and have fans come to shows. Like I geek out about it, man. It's really cool.
It's wonderful, man. I
But
mean,
yeah,
obviously, I mean, and then you all, like many people, right? You released your latest record right before or around the pandemic, and everyone kind of experienced a different kind of freeze and a kind of a shift in the industry, if you will, like even in the genre, in the way fans listen to music, how they kind of appreciate it, and still a successful record. But it was, I feel for everybody, every artist experienced something similar where they're like, how should we release music moving forward? Was that a lot of people were bummed about just having the album come out during that time? Just kind of digging a little bit, about that experience during the pandemic and kind of how that's shaped your upcoming music.
yeah, man. So the Good Things album, grateful for the success. It's certified platinum. It did its thing, and very grateful for all that. We led that off with a collaboration with Justin Bieber, who's like, one of the biggest pop stars of all time. And it was an interesting thing how that came about. We had written that song in Nashville, and we almost had the song done, and we sent it over, and like we'd met Justin at random events here and there and award shows and those things, and he was always like, man, I love country, I love songwriting, I want to come to Nashville and write some songs. And we're like, yeah, dude, come to Nashville, we'll write some songs, sure. And never ended up really getting to do that, but we wrote that song, and like, I don't know, the early Justin Bieber stuff, like One Less Lonely Girl and One Time and all those tunes, which were like songs that were coming out of Atlanta, like Tricky and the Dream. And those guys were like making these cool pop, hip hop R&B records, which would have like hip hop 808 drums and an acoustic guitar. And, the songs that were coming out then were like Chris Brown With You or Jason Derulo It Girl, and just really, really cool songs. And that was kind of like what his sound was. It was like these pop drums and acoustic guitars, which, at the time was kind of what was happening in country. And we wrote this song, and it was just like a little loop that we had done and an acoustic guitar. And it was like, there's something about the phrasing of this that feels like it would be cool. It sounds like a Dan Shay country song, but like it has a little bit of that influence in it, obviously. And we sent it to him. And I feel like why it worked so well, obviously, like we had momentum. He always has momentum. And I think it reminded a lot of his fans of why they fell in love with Justin Bieber in the first place. Like it was kind of tapped into his early sound a little bit. And it wasn't really us. Sure, it was one of our most pop leaning records. Like it had 808 bass on it. Like, I'm not going to argue that or hide that fact, but it wasn't like insanely compromising to what we do. And it was a perfect middle ground between what we do and what Justin does. And that song was crazy, man. It was different than Tequila and Speechless though. That song did, I think, 290,000 downloads first week, which like that's crazy, man. I mean, like
The
insane.
Bieber
It broke a
Army
bunch of
plus the
yeah,
MK
it broke a
Army. That's what you get.
dude. It broke a bunch of records and did that, and it went up. It went super high on the charts. Debuted at number 4 on the Hot 100. As you can tell, I don't keep track of any of these stats in my head. I'm not a numbers nerd or anything.
That's why I want to talk to you. I mean, I love nerding out, so this is good.
But that song went up really fast and it went down really fast. Like that song, it's got over 900 million streams on Spotify. Crazy, like really cool, but like still nowhere near as big as Tequila or Speechless at our shows. Those songs were that slow build, that climb that really, really penetrated the market and like connected with people. That's kind of the difference between country and pop, and there are anomalies in both genres, right? Obviously, like anything. But in pop, stuff goes up and it's gone really, really quickly. But a big song in country, man, can stick around for decades. Like some of these songs, you're seeing a big resurgence in 90s country right now. And some of these songs, like, are having a bigger moment than they even had when they were released, and it's really cool. That's the power of country songwriting. And why we're proud of being here on the ground with an acoustic guitar doing the Dan and Shay thing. And yeah, man, I feel like that was a kind of a learning lesson, and it was just a different sort of thing. It introduced us to a new fan base. Like we were getting streams in China, we were getting streams just in places that we had never been to, or cities or countries that we had never even heard of, and that's amazing. But we just like, yeah, it went up and it went down pretty quickly, and it's still a big song in our show, but nothing compared to those other two. And then that song happened, and then boom, I think that was like when the pandemic happened, right? That song came out October 4th, 2019. And then we announced our arena tour, and big dream come true for us. Like, we sold out Madison Square Garden in like
I was
40
so pumped. I
seconds. We
remember
sold,
seeing that. It was gnarly, man.
dude, I freaked out. I'm like calling Shay. I'm like, somebody's playing a prank. This is not real. And sold out 2 nights at Bridgestone in Nashville, and it was happening, man. It was like, it was wild. And then we did 3 shows. And sorry, I'll get back to talking about the music, but this is kind of a unprecedented little moment. You know, we've done 3 shows, 2 nights in Nashville and the Nationwide Arena in Columbus, and they were all sold out. We were just like gearing up for like, we're here. You know, we've hit that moment, and like all of our hard work, all of our lives, everything that's gone into this, it's being realized in this moment. And then we started hearing about this thing called COVID, right? And I was like, it's, you know, we hear about pandemics all the time. We've never really experienced anything like that in our lifetime. And sure enough, man, after we got to Philadelphia, Wells Fargo Arena, get there the night before what was supposed to be our show, went to the Sixers game. We're up there watching basketball, and we start getting alerts. You know, we're all sports fans, and we get alerts on our phone from ESPN app. It was like, so maybe it was the Jazz or somebody was playing, and somebody tested positive for COVID-19, locked all the players in the locker room, and I was like, oh shit, the NBA is shutting down. The NBA has got a lot more money riding than our Dan and Shay tour. So like, if the NBA shuts down, we're screwed. And sure enough, like AEG, the promoters, everybody was super optimistic and hopeful. I mean, we were kind of, it was us. There weren't a lot of arena acts out at the time, right? It was us, Billie Eilish, Post Malone, maybe Luke Combs was out. There weren't a ton, but we were kind of all, hey, are you guys canceling? Are you postponing? It was like, we're going to try to do it. And everybody was hopeful. And they were like, we're going to try to load in tomorrow in Philly, and we'll see what happens. I get on the bus. I go to sleep at like 10, which is past my bedtime, by the way. I'm like a 9 p.m. guy. I'm
Same.
old.
I wake up
Yeah,
at 4
dude.
a.m. No joke.
Dude, I love it. I love it. And I'm on the bus. It's like 5 a.m. I feel those wheels rolling. And I was like, this is not good. And sure enough, the bus was rolling back to Nashville. And my phone was blowing up. It was like, guys, the show's canceled. But even at that time, it was like, you know, I feel like we'll just pick up this weekend, drop it at the end of the tour. It'll be all good. Like, this will be a 1 week thing, no big deal. Long story short, we moved the tour like 2 or 3 times, and you know, God bless everybody who busted their ass to make that happen. Our agents, our team, our managers, like everybody was like, we were on it. You know, we had rescheduled dates like by the time I woke up. And that was important for us to message that to the fans. People spend their hard-earned money to come to these concerts, right? Especially at an arena. It's like, that's expensive, man. It's expensive to go to a damn movie these days, right? So like, our fans deserve to know what's going on, and they deserve a rescheduled show. And we were trying our best to message it out. And I was getting frustrated because we didn't have all the answers. Nobody did. We wanted the answers, but nobody had them. And especially that combined with the fact that it was like, no, this is our moment. The rug's being pulled out from under us. And we were just, you know, we stayed steady on the course, and ended up doing the tour eventually. And it was amazing. It was sold out and great. But that set us back. We went home, and I was in this house, which I had just moved into. The tornadoes hit that prior week in Nashville. It was like the craziest sequence of events, and all kinds of stuff was going on, and we just didn't know which way was up. But at first, Shay and I, and before Shay and I'd been personally hitting it so hard, like touring in vans and, you know, building stages at the Warped Tour, doing all those things, like trying to make it in music or whatever. Then all of a sudden it was gone. So at first I was like, all right, it's kind of cool, like a nice little breather, like a nice little reset. I'm chilling. It's gonna be only like 2 weeks, so I'll catch my breath, like hang at home for a minute, and do some yard work, and we'll be back out on the road. Then that wasn't the case, right? We were stuck home for a long time, and I think it sort of drove us all a little bit insane, especially as artists, like trying to figure out what was next. And a lot of people got like caught up in doing the live stream thing, and that was happening a lot. And it was tougher for us because we were a duo, right? And it was like, we were doing the social distancing thing, and we weren't hanging together, and we weren't going to do like separate IG lives or whatever. So we were kind of like quiet on socials, and we didn't really have much more because we'd been touring and like doing all the promo, and we didn't have a lot of music written, right? To keep churning stuff out. I know a lot of people did a good job of releasing stuff, even though it was really hard to release music during the pandemic. People did a great job of it. And debuting new stuff, like Wallen killed it on that, you know, playing acoustic songs. Luke Combs was killing it. We just didn't really have much written. unfortunately. And there came a time, like, a couple months in, where Shay and I were like, dude, I haven't seen anybody in forever. And again, like, no one knew what this thing was. No one knew what the protocols were. It was like, dude, I don't have COVID. You don't have COVID. Like, let's hang, man. Let's kick it. And that was a really healthy reset for us, because we hadn't spent any time apart in, forever since we met. Shay came over the house, and I had this piano that was very out of tune over there, and he came to the house, and we were chatting, hugged it out. It's like, I miss you, brother. Like, he is truly a brother to me, man. Like, our bond is like, I can get into that later too, is like stronger than ever. I mean, we are just like, it's family. And he came over, and that was just a different thing, man. We hadn't seen each other in a while, and it was like, yo, you want to jam? It's like kind of what we did when we first met. Sat down
Back
and
in the
we
10
wrote, I should
days.
probably, yeah, dude, exactly. We wrote, I should probably go to bed. And I didn't have a studio. And I was like, dude, I got a guest bed. Like, I got my microphone. Like, let's lean his mattress up against the wall. And we wrote it. I just started, there's a video of me like producing it on the internet somewhere, but we just kind of produced it at my house, and he sang it that day. And that was it was crazy that song ended up being a number one and a big hit for us. Like, we did all that in my house during the pandemic. And I think for me, as a writer, artist, producer kind of nerd, it was a cool moment for me to like prove that I could do it, like by myself. Like, no one else played any instruments on that. I did it all just here at my house with no help. And that's not my vibe. Like, I'm all about collaboration, and I'm all about like the sum of the parts is always better. That's why we co-write. That's why I like co-producing records with Scott Hendricks, and that's why Shay and I are in a duo, right? But I think for me, like as a growing producer, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do it myself, man. And I did the 10,000 hours one myself too, but something different about bed. Like, I was like, I'm just gonna flex on this. We're gonna do this flat 7, and we're gonna do this minor 4 thing, and it's gonna get musical nerd, and then I'm gonna do a string arrangement, and I did, and cool, it did its thing, and went number one. But then we were like, we now we don't have any songs again. Like, we're
And y'all,
screwed. We don't
y'all
have any more
dropped that
songs.
just as a single, correct, Dan? Like that was prior to
Yeah,
even the album coming out. And I remember, for those that don't know, I mean, before even Country Central, I would just write like blurbs about songs, and I think I should probably go to bed, regardless of what genre you want to call it. I remember that was the first song I recognized you were a producer. Like, you just produce your stuff. I didn't know that prior, and I think that was really cool to me though, just because like just me as a music nerd, I appreciate the writing, the behind the scenes. I was like, damn, Dan produced this. So like, regardless if it's pop or country, I was like, this is a really cool song. This guy did it all on his own. That was pretty. I nerded out on that, and I remember writing up a blurb about it like right around the pandemic, and then obviously it went number one, and then you had to follow it up with something, which is very interesting.
yeah, and we had a song that we had written a while back, actually, called "Glad You Exist." That was just like an acoustic thing, just like a little campfire, a little sing along, and I was like, man, this is a special like lyric. It's a good sentiment, a very simple, lullaby sing songy thing, but there was no real production on it or anything. So I started messing with it one day, and same kind of deal on that. Just produced it here at the house on my own, programming a bunch of stuff, taking samples, like hitting on my guitar, making a snare drum sound, like pitch shifting weird, like hitting on my desk or my thigh, whatever it was, and made a record out of that. And that was actually one of our biggest radio number ones. That one stuck around, and it kind of screwed us a little bit, because the song went up, and there's this thing called research, right? Like, they do call out where they have a random sample of people, which, love it or hate it, it kind of is the thing that motivates country radio or any radio in general. And that song goes up, and it wasn't researching super great, but it was selling great. It was doing 65,000, 70,000 units a week consumption, and that's, for us, that's great. And at the very last minute, when it went number one, it started researching like a monster. It was researching for like 10 weeks as the number one researching song, which, and this happens to a lot of artists, their stations are going to be reluctant to take that song out of rotation if it's researching, because for them, that's like security and safety for their radio station. If they're playing a song that is proven to be working, they need that to work, right? They need songs that are working. That's why you hear a lot of stations play gold records, right? Because those songs have proven throughout the test, they've stood the test of time. And the industry is evolving like crazy, right? And everybody's fighting to survive. And in radio's defense, like, they need stuff to work, right? It's harder for radio to take chances on new artists than it was a long time ago. So in their defense, they kept Glad You Exist in heavy rotation. And we launched another single called Steal My Love, which, we had made the Good Things album as these things were happening, right? As Glad You Exist was going up the chart. And it kind of hurt us. Like, honestly, we were hearing from a lot of people that, like, hey, man, we love the new song, but Glad You Exist is just a monster. It's testing through the roof for us. And I was like, I guess they're playing our song. And that's kind of one thing that we battle with as artists here in Nashville. There's so much high regard. There's so much power given to the number one on country radio, right? And all a lot of us care about is like, well, I don't care about the old one, even though you're playing it and it's selling and is a big hit for us. Take it out of rotation and play this new one so we could tell our friends and have a number one party. You kind of get caught up in that. And I think it's starting to matter less and less. It's like a big hit isn't always just defined by going number one on country radio. Hell, I mean, 19 You and Me wasn't even a top 10. It peaked at 11. It drove us crazy at the time because we were like, no, but all of our friends are getting number ones. And it's all good. I think that honestly worked in our favor because when you go number one on your first single, you kind of have a target on your back, right? And if your second single doesn't go number one, the trajectory, people are, they falling off. But for us, it was like, cool, we set the bar like right here. We still had room to grow, which I think was good in the long term. But at the time, it pissed us off. But, it happens.
No, I mean, it is wild, though, how long Glad You Exist lasted. Because to your point, I mean, now you're recounting them. I'm like, damn, I forget how many of these songs they were just dropping that would go boom, boom, boom. Like, this because pandemic, we just all lived our lives and we almost forgot about, just the business of all of the things. But radio was still kind of almost, people were stuck at home. So maybe some people were listening to it more than ever. But to your point, like we had, I Should Probably Go to Bed. Then we had 10,000 Hours, Glad You Exist. Definitely very similar. Like, I mean, it's awesome. I love that you produced it, but very similar styles, almost to a point where you hear the fans and they're like, well, they just release the same music every single time. I mean, obviously wildly successful, connects with your fans, obviously the people that sell at your shows. So that's what matters. But it was interesting that was kind of if there was any backlash that people were like, they release the same music every time. And then you release, Steal My Love. And then obviously you have a record that's still a monster. And then now radio's even not playing the brand new single. And you already have some maybe subsection of the internet saying, we don't like this. So it's interesting that all happened, of course, during the pandemic with this record.
Yeah, man. And a lot of that album was like, we had 10,000 Hours, which lasted, it went up the chart, went down. Then we had Bed, Glad You Exist. That's like, man, okay, cool. So is this going to be an album? Is it going to be an EP? Are these just going to be standalone singles? They were all number ones, like big hits for us, but we felt we're still an albums band. I mean, I know everybody's always battling with that is like, should we just release singles or should we do an album? I feel like another reason why we have a loyal diehard fan base is because we've made albums that we care about all the songs, whether it's an exploratory phase and we don't nail all of them, we're still pouring our hearts and souls and into every detail of all those songs. And, I feel like that album, we kind of needed to wrap something up to tie a bow around this era, with the 10,000 Hours, Bed, and Glad You Exist. So we kind of like, I wouldn't say rushed writing the rest of the album, but it was definitely our fastest. And that's what happens for an artist, man. Like your first album, you've got your whole life to write it. And I know that's cliche to say, but as things get busier, it becomes harder to write songs, right? It becomes harder to find things to say that you've never said before, sounds to use that you've never used before. And it was like a lot of those songs were kind of ideas that we had started along the way that were like, well, this is okay. This is cool. We can make it good with good production. And I'm proud of like the production on that album. Song wise, I wouldn't say it's our best album, but there's some good stuff on there. I think there's good stuff.
One Direction.
Yeah, dude, that's a special song that I sort of sad inspiration. I'm a huge animal rescue guy. Like, we're big into Abby, my wife, runs an animal rescue in Nashville, and we have 4 rescue dogs. Like, that's like as important of a part of my life as music. And my dog Joy, who was our first rescue, they're all super healthy and great. So grateful and fortunate for that. But I looked at her face and her face is going super white, right? She's getting older. I think she's 9 now. I looked at her and I was like, I got like sad about it. I was like, man, it sucks. Abby and I, like, we'll be hanging out and I don't know, I'll have smoked a joint or something. And I'm like, man, isn't it crazy that like time only moves in one direction? Like, it sucks because it's left to right. It's linear. And it kind of hit me. I was like, man, that's a crazy thought. Like, time only does move in one direction, and it was sad. But I think like it's like the Jason Isbell song, if we were vampires, like that kind of idea.
Yes, dude.
It's like my favorite song ever, dude. That's just such a special song. And I
Absolutely.
think he says something is like, if we were vampires and death was a joke, we'd go out on the sidewalk and smoke, but I wouldn't feel the need to hold your hand, whatever that lyric is. And
Yep.
that's like so true, man. Because it's finite, because of the idea of mortality, we need to appreciate the moments a little bit more. And that was how that song came about. And I know it resonated with Shay because he's got little kids running around and like, man, we go out on the road and come back and one of them's walking or one of them's saying mama. And he was like, well, did I miss him saying dada for the first time? That kind of stuff. And, life sort of hits you like that. And that was a special song, man. I love that one. And, these songs really resonate with our fans. And back to that point is like, not every song is going to get to go to radio or be a single, but we try to make the best music that we can because it's going to connect with somebody. And dude, I appreciate you hearing that song, and I'm glad it connected with you, and that makes it all worthwhile. If it connects with one person, if it helps one person get through their day, it's like it was worth battling it out, writing that song, making the record, and then doing it, whether it's your number one at country radio or not, man. That's why we do it.
So you made a really interesting point about kind of being an album band, and it made me think a bit like with every album being like sonically a bit of a natural consequence to the other. I mean, moving in that direction of being a crossover act and just kind of like honing that sound. I have to ask a little bit like, where do you see things going like leading into the next record? Like, is there still something you want to do and achieve as a band musically?
Yeah, man. So this is like a several part answer here. Throughout our career, we've kind of tried different things and tried different sounds, as any artist does. You look back at the trajectory of pretty much any artist who's been around for a long time. You go far right, you go far left, you do some that are down the middle, and sometimes we go too far, sometimes we're too safe. It's human, and we write what we know, and whatever comes out, like for better or for worse, is just that's Dan and Shay. And I you know I got to an interesting place with music in general. Like maybe I'm I'm gonna get into this here because I've never really like told anyone this, and my
Bring it
wife
on.
obviously knows about it. Yeah, but I got to a place where I like kind of hated music, right? And I'm like the guy who everyone is like, that guy loves music, man. Like he knows a lot about every artist and songs, and like I'm an encyclopedia about music. But I got to a place, and I was able to like self-diagnose through like therapy and all the things why that happened. We got to a place where we sold out an arena tour, right? Like on paper, any artist or musician's dream come true. We checked off all these things on our bucket list. There wasn't an award we didn't win. We're so grateful for all the accolades and everything that happened. But I got to a place where I wasn't happy. I wasn't having fun. And, there were glimmers of it, like being on stage, feeling the connection with the fans. There's no denying that. Like that is special. But that's, man, in the grand scheme, even when you're on tour, Paul McCartney, I think, said it. He was like, man, we're not getting paid the big bucks to be playing an hour a night. It's being away from home for the 23 hours a night that we're not on stage, right? That's so much of it is not being on stage. That hour and a half, 2 hours that we were on stage, like that's 3 nights a week is such a minor part of the grand scheme of what we do. And I got to a place where I was like going down paths that weren't fulfilling me because I thought I needed to like maintain the status quo. Um, we were having great success and growing our band and having unprecedented hits, and the numbers and stats were there. It was awesome. But I was getting caught up doing things that weren't why I got into this business. I, I'm like, I know how to do social media, right? And I know a lot of artists are battling with this right now. I was spending in 2021, I was spending 95% of my time. Wasn't even like spending enough time with my wife, with my dogs. I wasn't spending time with friends. All I was doing was like trying to game the algorithm on social media, and I was spending all my time in Photoshop, in
I
Premiere, in
remember.
Lightroom.
I would watch it.
Dude,
Like this
yeah.
guy is so surgical. I mean, it was kind of cool to me to see, but like surgical. You were so over it, you know?
And I still like pride myself on that. We are the only ones who run our social media, and that's why there hasn't been a lot of posts lately, because I want our fans to know that if something's coming out, it's from us. It's who we are. If we have something to say, we're going to say it. And if not, like if we're in music making mode, like we're not going to have somebody on there like just posting random shit of us. I know that that's like not the right strategy, and I need to like find a happy medium, and I'm working on that, and I will moving forward. But I got to a place where I was only doing social media, and I was only doing things that weren't why I got into this business. Man, I love writing country songs. I love listening to country music. I wasn't doing any of that. I wrote 4 songs total in 2021. 2 of those songs were Christmas songs, and 2 of them were for another band's album. This band called Laney, who I love, good friends, and we go way back. But yeah, Oklahoma guys. Um, and I love that opportunity. But man, I'm not like, I know it's a necessary evil to do the social media thing and edit the content and the graphics. And I was getting so hung up. It was like anytime we would get like a chart position moved up on the hot country playlist, it was like, and 1 spin increase on a hot, like I was going so bananas, spending all my time and wherewithal doing that instead of doing the thing that I love, writing songs. And when we got back from the tour, it was awesome. We celebrated it, sold out Boston TD Garden. Epic, man. It was like we blew it out that night. It's crazy. It was wild. Got home. There was a couple weeks where I didn't go on my phone. I didn't see anybody. I didn't talk to anybody. And I was like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I was like, grateful for everything we've accomplished. My wife and I live a super humble life. Like we can survive and all.
He owns a Prius, y'all. He drives a Prius.
Camry, hybrid Camry, dude. Things getting like 45 miles to the gallon. I do have an FJ Cruiser that's getting like 10 to the gallon, but I barely take it out of the garage.
Love it.
I was like, man, I might be a landscaper. I love working out in the yard. I still do. I'm such a nerd about that, dude. Like going out and mowing and getting the yard looking right. Although my yard doesn't look great right now, so I'm not going to show it. But I was kind of worn down. We had been going so hard for 10 years. And I was like, I don't know what's next. I don't know like where we go from here. And I was like, I kind of lost touch with Shay a little bit, right? Like him and I were best friends, and life happens. And that was a natural progression for our group. I got married, adopted 1,000,000 dogs. He got married, had kids. And like those things are so important, right? And we go out on the road. We've got our own buses now, which is beautiful because he's like a night owl, right? He stays up all night and then he sleeps in late. He's changing that now, I think. He's gotten into golf recently. But I'm up 5 a.m. making records on the front of the bus. Like it's such a complimentary thing. That's why our duo works in the first place. But, it was like we weren't actively spending enough time together. And I think that was the magic at the very beginning of our band. We lived together because we didn't have any money to live anywhere else. And we were finding our own paths, creating our own journeys. And then after the tour, I was like, man, I need to like get with Shay and like, we need to have like a bonding moment. We need to reconnect and just like talk about our dreams and our futures and like, where do we see this thing going? Do we want to take a break? Do we want to make more music, or do we want to go on tour, or do we want to do whatever, like we need to have a one-on-one conversation. And I aired it out there to him. He came over to my house, and like no one knows this. Like half of our team doesn't even know this, but I was just like, dude, I'm in such like a sad place with music. I'm just trying to like fall in love with it again. I'm doing whatever I can. I'm listening to New Music Friday every week. I'm trying. And I think what the reason was that I fell out of love with music is because I was spending too much time doing things that weren't music, right? I was doing social media. I was an influencer or a digital marketing guy or whatever it was. And man, if that's your thing, more power to you. Like you can make an incredible living doing that, and that's awesome. But I moved to this town because I love sitting down with an acoustic guitar and writing a song. That is the happiest that I am in my career, is when we finish a good hook or somebody throws something out there that it is like, oh yeah, there is no higher high than that. I'm telling you, when you get a good demo back or you finish writing a song, you write that last line of the bridge and you're like, we nailed this. That's a higher high than any award, any number one, anything, any accolade, any stat. And I hadn't felt that in a long time because I had only written 4 songs. And I was like, Shay, like, I want to spend time on our relationship and hang out like we used to as friends. I mean, obviously we remained great friends. We've never had beef. Honestly, people were like, what? in an interview is like, "What's your biggest fight you guys have ever got?" I don't know, man. Like, we don't fight, dude. Like we're chilling. Like he has his friend group, I have mine, and like I think it's so healthy how where we are as a band, as friends, as brothers, as family, and we hung out at my house till like 4 a.m. that night, like we did in the early days, and just cracked beers, and we were just airing it out, man. We were both crying, and it was like, man, I love you, dude. And like, if we had never done another thing the rest of our career, everything we had accomplished was like insane. Never in our
It's
wildest
a
dreams.
dream for
So
people. I mean, this no one ever.
yeah,
Let's be honest, plain people never ever reach what you all have hit, and that's a career, and it's a very successful and something for both y'all to be incredibly proud of.
yeah, and it was funny. We have a song that we it's gonna come out at some point that I think is a really special song. But it's like, man, if nothing ever comes to this, like Dan and Shay is always gonna be, right? Like I was like, that's like a good song title, always gonna be. And we wrote like a really special song that with that title that I'm just finishing the production on now. But that kind of like it was like if we never do another thing, like our music's gonna exist out there, and someday somebody's gonna come back and be like, you know what? I had my first kiss to 19 You and Me by Dan and Shay, or I went with who's my now wife, and we met at Dan and Shay's concert at the BOK Center. And like, that's really special, man, to exist in the ecosystem and like in the history, in the writing of country music. But I was like, I want to like do everything in my power to find that joy again and find the joy in the process rather than the result. I was getting so hung up in like, oh man, did it do more of the units than 10,000 hours? Did we win a Grammy? Did we do this? And I would get so bent out of shape, man. And we're all competitive. It's in our nature. And I have heart to hearts with a lot of artists behind the scenes about this, like a lot of guys will get in the room and want us to air this out, man. You think guys on top of the world, they're winning everything, winning the big trophies, but they're hung up on something, and it gets to all of us because we're competitive. We wouldn't be where we are if we weren't. And I told Shay, I was like, the thing that makes me the happiest is writing songs with you. We write great separately. We've had success. He's had a hit with Rascal Flatts, that he wrote with Frazier and some other guys. And, I write my own songs with other people, and that's great. But the magic is the two of us. I was like, we need to spend more time just writing, just the two of us. Even if we don't get anything, let's like do what we used to do and pull up the microphone and make a joke song or make a parody or like record an acoustic version or do a cover or whatever, like whatever it is, like just be together, spending time doing what we love. And we did, and we got back together, and it was the craziest magic I've ever experienced in my entire life. It was crazier than when we first met. I think as country music as a whole, I know Dan and Shay did, I know our industry, I know Nashville, there was this thing called the track guy, right? And I'm a producer myself. I have a t-shirt that somebody made me that says track guy, right? That's like, I love producing records, but I think we kind of used it, and no disrespect to any of those guys. Like I love writing with a track guy because again, I am one myself, right? But I think we got kind of lazy and we used it as a crutch, where the songwriting quality I think slipped a little bit because we could cheat and tell ourselves like, yo man, that lyric is like a 3 out of 10, but shit, man, like that like impact or that downlifter on the top of the chorus was banging, and like, man, that track explodes. And you could fake anyone. You could fake the label, you could fake radio. Sometimes the fans are smart. The fans are usually smarter and they see through it. But I feel like we as a whole in industry were using that as a crutch. And I was like, let's like not even open my computer. Let's get at my house. I've got a little piano that barely works over here. Grab acoustic guitars, because that's what we did when we first met, right? Let's, even if we have no ideas, let's write songs like that again. And even if nothing comes of it, dude, and we don't continue this band and I go on to produce records and Shay does a solo career, which he would have massive success because he's the best singer in the world. Awesome, man. At least like we saw it through and we were happy and we love each other, because at the end of the day, that's more important than anything we've accomplished, like our relationship and staying tight as friends. And I can't even make this up. Like, I think Andy was with us most of the time, and because he was there in the beginning, man. He was in the tent. He lived in the tent with me. And it was like lightning in a bottle. And I remember him saying, he was like, this is the magic. Like, this is Dan and Shay. And again, whether the songs came out or end up coming out, they're coming out. I promise you they are. I don't know when, because I just like I'm so I don't know. It takes me forever to do stuff. I'm just slow. Um, but we just found that magic, man, and we wrote 50 or 60 songs at the beginning of this year. My goal for myself, I was like, Shay, we're going to write 50 songs together this year. I was like, compared to 50 is a lot of songs, dude.
It's
Like,
no joke.
just showing up, just being there, like spending time together. If it's 3, 4 days a week, even if we don't have a great idea, let's write something. Like, because that's where we have fun and that's what keeps this thing going. And we did, man. And we tapped into it and we found, I like thinking about it now, I feel like we found what was the magic of the first album, but we just I think kind of know what we're doing a little bit more now. You know what I'm saying? Like the first album, we had no idea like how to tie up a hook or like how to, you know, what this melody will do over these chords. We're a little bit more informed musically now, just after doing it for so long. But it was that like unbridled, just pure heart. And so many of these songs we've been working and we've been in the studio. That's why I haven't posted much because it's not like, and there's probably people speculating like, yo, is Dan and Shay broken up? Like, are they on a hiatus or they figured it out? It's like because the complete opposite. It's because we're on such a high musically. We're so in it. That's dude, my wife's like, why are you waking up so early? When I get that bug, when I know something special or there's that magic, I can't sleep. And it's probably why I have bags under my eyes and probably a lot of these. But like I wake up and I come to the studio and I can't stop. And she knows it. And she is so great and so supportive of me and allows me to do that and encourages me because it's like, you got to ride that wave, man. Ride that wave of inspiration and creativity when it's there because it's not always there, man. And I've been just like buried in the studio, so happy on such a high. And Shay and I's relationship is better than ever. And I'm not saying like social media is like detrimental to somebody's mental health, but for me, I kind of get caught up in comparing myself to other people or like, this guy's doing this or this guy's towards it. Well, we sold out here, but like his ticket price was higher. So he's did better than us. Like, why are we doing that, man? We don't need to do that. Like as an industry, we
The
need to be
fact that
like,
you're even out there is incredible. I mean, especially after like the past
exactly.
2, 3 years of our lives, the fact that I don't know, the fact that you're able to still kind of be inspired and be on play arenas, you know what I mean? I think overall as fans, number one, I appreciate music more than ever. I think in 2022, just seeing how big of a year countries has a format, I think overall everybody is just more, you know, appreciative of what we have going here. And that's why we are seeing some of the best songs, in my opinion, coming out right now. So it's the best time to be a fan, in my opinion, in decades. So it's a special
I
thing
love,
happening.
this doesn't go unnoticed. I love y'all's optimistic attitude about music. And when you post that, like it is such a good time to be a country music fan, I'm like, you're damn right it is. It is. There's so much great music coming out from all different kinds of artists, all different styles. The span is so vast right now. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. You know, the pandemic was the worst period in history. Like it sucked. But I think a lot of great music came from it because people had nothing to do but sit at home and write songs. And back to the track thing where we used it as a crutch and I feel like our song quality was lessened because of that sometimes. And I always try to make our records with organic instruments. You know, I've always fought to do that. So even if our melodies and what we naturally do is pop leaning, I try to do it with acoustic guitars or mandolin or like, you know what I mean? And I'll try to do it with organic unique samples. But still, it was like we were not writing as great as songs as we could have been because it was like we would just be jamming to like some beat that was already there and it was like, oh, we don't need to write a second verse, screw it. And I think that I think a lot of people got back to the roots during the pandemic because on Zoom, tell you what, it was hard to bang a track on a Zoom or on a laptop like that. If somebody was in another place, like it was a mess. So it was basically grab an acoustic guitar and you're typing out lyrics and like you're in your own space having to write songs the real way. How we all did when we moved to this town. And I really do think that like inspired a whole new generation of great country music and great country songwriting. And man, I feel like we're in that place. We haven't, you know, released anything and we will, and I'll send it to you guys before it's, you know, before it's out there. I'm really proud of it. And it's just songs that, man, we wrote on acoustic guitar and we're recording with real instruments and, you know, in a studio with our Nashville band, like just badass players who, you know, we're so lucky to have such incredible talent here. And I'm really proud of it, man.
Well,
And
like Justin, all these people, like freaking people that we grew up listening to. It's cool to see that you've like you've kept like the brotherhood together. You make sure you take care of your people, and I don't know, it doesn't go unnoticed. I think by your fan base, and I think that's why your fans are so excited for what's to come, and that's why I want people to see. Like, I mean, it's really cool to hear what y'all have cooking up, and we are curious to hear like, what Dan Shay can do next. And obviously, you just as a creative mind, I'm always curious to hear, what do you value? So it's awesome to hear, like, yes, you do value real instrumentation, the organic craft of songwriting. It's a special thing, and the more we've learned throughout the past couple of years is that, man, people just love a story. I mean, if you're telling a story that somehow they can connect with, like from the ground up, or 19 You and Me, then I mean, I think it will always connect. And with social media nowadays, the good part of it, the good, not evil part of it is, man, someone's appreciating it and someone's loving it, and that's a platform. So it's a cool time. Like I said, the best time to be a fan.
Yeah, man. And I think like we are, regarding like the pop country thing, or, the pendulum is always going to swing. It has always swung historically. It's going to go one way, then it's going to come back the other way. And I think the thing that resonates more than anything, more than being in phase with the pendulum, wherever it is at the current time, is authenticity and being genuine. I think sticking true to what you do and your sound and not compromising that and doing the best version of you, I think that's what resonates with the fans. Like, sure, our music, we sing high, right? We sing like inherently, if we sit down with an acoustic guitar, we're going to sing a little bit more of a pop melody than Cody Johnson. Cody Johnson is my favorite damn artist on the planet. I could sing you every single one of his songs on every one of his albums. I bought a ticket and went to his show just as a fan in the crowd. Love his music, and we have such mutual respect for each other, and we can coexist. That is a beautiful thing about country music right now. But being true to yourself, being authentic, man, pushing yourself. Like, what's the best version of Dan and Shay? How do we raise that bar? How do we make the best Dan and Shay album? Not how do we make an album that sounds like Cody Johnson? Because you can go listen to Cody Johnson, and he's amazing, and he's going to be the best version of Kojo.
And people would
And
see right
I
through
think
it,
that's
right?
just
Dan, people would see through you trying to ape somebody. And ironically, right, if you said we're going to go incredibly rootsy, they would just find something else to criticize about. So I just feel like you're better off being you, but being the
yep,
best you. And if it's real, I mean, to me, if it's the best song, that's what really always wins people over. I think when people do the different styles, whether it's pop country or rock or whatever, it's only when it's a diluted version of what someone else does better that people really crucify it in a sense. You know what I mean? So when it's just you and it's truly what you wanted to do all along, people buy into it, and they believe in it.
absolutely.
So if that's what y'all have coming, I mean, I think people are in for a really good surprise.
Yeah, man, 100%.
No, that's like my favorite freaking thing about country music right now. Cause like I feel like for the longest time, a little bit, folks were saying like, country music used to be just about telling the truth. Like, what happened to that? And there's just this awesome space for everybody to play a little bit and like do their own thing. I feel like we haven't seen like so much like sonic diversity in the format, and I've talked about this at length on this podcast. Like, really, since I can remember, like there's a space for Wallen to do like his like genre straddling thing, and for y'all too, and for Kojo. I mean, it's just really really perfect, and it's what I've wanted country music to be for quite some time.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's going to continue to grow like that too. I feel like it's just it's only the beginning.
Y'all, we want to thank you so much for hanging out with us as always. You can hit us up at countrycentral.com. Check out the new camo hat at countrycentral.com. Excuse me, at Country Central on Instagram all week long. We'll have the hot takes, the single reviews, all that good stuff. And as always, we will catch you again real soon with another episode.